And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored in part by Allison Cook, Super Inframan, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so much for your support. And if you want to become a patron and help support Where Did the Road Go, you can do so at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content all month. You can also support the show through donations off the website or pick up some merch. All available at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I have joining me Mr. Adam Gorightly.
Hello.
And Greg Bishop.
Greetings.
And I don't think I've ever had the two of you on together.
I don't think you have either.
You,
in fact, I'm
probably
positive you haven't.
Yeah. So that's something that's clearly been long overdue. And we're going to talk tonight about Robert Anton Wilson.
Yeah, and it's a perfect, yeah.
And I wanted to do this because, honestly, I'm not super familiar with Robert Anton Wilson. I've read his Illuminati books, or Illuminatus books, and I've heard, little clips of him talking here and there, but I'm not overly familiar with him, and I know that both of you are. So for people who don't know, let's read the Wikipedia thing here. Robert Anton Wilson was an American author, futurist, and self-described agnostic mystic, recognized within Discordianism as a episcopos. Is that it?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Pope and saint. Wilson helped publicize Discordianism through his writings and interviews. He was born January 18th, 1932, and he died January 11th, 2007. So
yeah.
Where should we start?
Don't know. Gorightly and I went to his memorial service in Santa Cruz.
Oh.
Now, Greg met him before I did. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, Greg. You interviewed him for The Excluded Middle, your magazine, or your zine.
The zine, whatever it's called. Yeah, in 1991, I think, there was a conference. What was it called? It was a psychedelics type conference. The sound photosynthesis people up in where is it, Sebastopol or something like that?
Yeah.
They put together this conference. Wilson was one of the speakers. I believe Are You Serious from Mondo 2000 was there. I can't remember who else. But I came to the conference with my friend Robert Larson, who eventually became a co-founder of the Excluded Middle. He said, because he knew these people, he said, "Why don't you come up and go to the conference? I mean, we got a pass." I said, "Well, sure." So I showed up with him, and I decided to pretend that I was a writer for the LA Weekly. For no reason whatsoever, except that I'd written for the Weekly once. So I told the organizers I was a writer for the LA Weekly, and they believed me. And so they just gave me the run of the place, and I noticed they were having and I'd been reading Wilson's books for like 5 or 6 years at that point. And this is in no way unique. I believe Wilson kept me from committing suicide.
Really?
And I told him this later, and he's like, "Yeah, a lot of people tell me that." It was so funny how he was just so totally unimpressed with it, which I thought was really cool. So, and it took me a long time to get up the gumption to tell him that. I mean, I'd sort of kind of known him for like 6 or 8 years, and when I finally told him that, he's like, "Yeah, well, whatever."
What did you read or whatever that you thought that he?
Yeah.
The winner script idea, where you just decide everything's going to work out instead of everything sucks and you should die.
Ah.
So, it's like, I think one of his things is suggestions in one of the books, which I've read all of them but the Illuminatus trilogy. One of his suggestions was the winter script is, everything's going to work out okay. Things I want to do, I'll be able to do. And then, just keep those ideas in the front of your mind for as long as you possibly can. And eventually his prediction was that they will start happening. And he was right. It was really hard for me to do at first, but it's like any addiction. I was addicted to negativity. And so I had to, get myself in negativity rehab. And I did that through reading Wilson's books. And it eventually, I just thought, okay, everything's going to work out okay. Either I'm going to kill myself or everything's going to work out okay. So it's like, let's try this work out okay thing for a while. And it worked. I mean, I started the magazine, I started writing, I met people, and life became fun and interesting, and all the things that Wilson said they would be if you just decided that it was going to be that way. And so, but at that point, I was, still struggling with that winter script thing, but they had a meeting backstage. All the speakers just sat down at this big round table, and they introduced themselves, and they just started talking about stuff, just an impromptu speakers conference. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm a writer. I'm going to sit at the table and nobody's going to care. And they didn't have anybody, chewing you out or anything. It was run by a bunch of hippies. So I just sat at the table. When they got to me, I said, I'm a writer for the LA Weekly. And and they said, oh, okay. And they went on. And so I sat with all these.
They could have said, hey, you don't look like a hippie. Who are you?
Yeah. Well, not everybody looked different. I mean, I don't even remember who was there.
Yeah.
Like I said, for all I know, Alex Gray was there and, McKenna. I have no idea. But the only person I wanted to see was Wilson because he was becoming very important as a influence on me. So we went through this whole thing. Everybody talked, I made some points that people listened to, which I thought was really cool. I kind of surprised myself. And then everybody left because they went off to do other things. And I went up to Wilson and I said, look, I'm writing an article for the Weekly. Is it okay that if we could do an interview for a few minutes? And he said, yeah, sure, sit down. So we did. And I recorded it. And I was not writing an article for anybody. I had no idea what to do with it. And then 7, 8, 9 months later, I had a magazine. So I just stuck it in the magazine as one of my first interviews.
Wow.
So I kind of just bluffed my way into talking to him. And then after that, once in a while we'd write or whatever. And then about when Gorightly started talking to him, I had never I'd seen him at talks. We'd emailed, sent letters a couple times. But then, Gorightly was working on the Discordian book, and he can continue the story. Hello?
Adam?
Hello? Am I supposed to take it from here?
Yes.
Yes.
So I was thinking about, how to talk about how I got interested in this and met up with Wilson. And it really started, it's like in the mid 80s. And, I'm going to sneeze here. I got cat hair floating around everywhere. And I was in Ojai, California. You ever been to Ojai, Bart's Books in Ojai, Greg?
Constantly. I love that place.
Oh, okay, cool. So we were at Bart's Books, and it was closed, but Bart's Books is like an indoor-outdoor thing, and even the days they're closed, they still have books outside, some of the cheaper books. And if you take them, it's kind of a hippie thing. If you take a few books, well, throw a couple dollars or whatever you have under the door. So I was there with a friend. It was closed, but they going, hey, these books here, they'll blow your mind. And it was the Illuminatus trilogy. And so, yeah, we got them and threw a couple books into the couple bucks inside. And that kind of started the journey. When the first time I tried to read Illuminatus, it was just way too much, man. It's like a mix of conspiracy theories, science fiction, psychedelia, alternate realities, real people and fake people, and some parts are true and some are not. It's just a phantasmagoria that was I enjoyed it, but half of it I didn't understand what the hell was going on. But later it would become, or I would become kind of an expert on certain aspects of the book, and talk about that in a bit. But anyway, so, that was there. I was familiar with Illuminatus. It was kind of fun and intriguing and confusing, and I became more familiar with some of Wilson's work, like Cosmic Trigger. Part 1, his biography, is a great read. If nobody's read that, you get some insight into the man. Meanwhile, I'd become interested in Kerry Thornley, and that's a big subject right there, and ended up working on a book about Thornley, a biography. Just in a nutshell, Thornley in the late 50s with his friend Greg Hill started a spoof religion called Discordianism, the worship of the Greek goddess of chaos and discord. It was kind of a spoof that was like an inside joke between Greg Hill and his friend, or Kerry Thornley and his friend Greg Hill, and another guy named Bob Newport. Over time, it would grow into a big thing, but back in the late 50s, it was just this in-joke. And so in 59, Thornley joined the Marines, where along the way he met Lee Harvey Oswald and started writing a book partially based on Oswald 3 years before the Kennedy assassination called The Idle Warriors. And so that's kind of the first curiosity about Thornley. After the Kennedy assassination, Thornley provided testimony of his knowledge of Oswald to the Warren Commission. And in 1967, Jim Garrison started his investigation of the Kennedy assassination in New Orleans, claiming it was like a government plot. The military-industrial complex was involved, and he fingered a bunch of different people that were supposedly involved in this, and one of those was Kerry Thornley. And so the story even gets odder from there. And I don't need to get into all those details, but along the way, as all this craziness was happening, Thornley got involved in the Summer of Love and promoter of psychedelics. He was also interested in libertarianism. He's all over the map with his interests, and he came to know Wilson during this period when Robert Anton Wilson was an editor at Playboy. And they started exchanging correspondence about different stuff related to anarchism and libertarianism. And Wilson, along the way, became a card-carrying member of Discordianism. Each had their own Discordian name. Wilson was, what was it?
Malcalypse the Younger?
No, that was Greg Hill.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, I can't believe I'm free. Something like Malachi the Foul or something like that. He had a few Discordian names. But so during this period, they got involved in different pranks. And they started, one of them was a prank they started to really screw with Jim Garrison, because Garrison had all these oddball investigators that kind of latched onto him, called the Daily Plaza Irregulars. They weren't part of his official investigative crew, but they were different Kennedy assassination conspiracists, and one of them proposed the theory that the Illuminati was behind the Kennedy assassination. And when Thornley heard this, he thought it was hilarious, even though he was a target of the investigation, and it looked like he might be indicted for it. But for some crazy reason, they thought they'd start screwing around with Garrison and promote this theory that Thornley indeed was with the Illuminati, and they used all their fake Illuminati names. Thornley's was Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, and started sending letters to different people with the John Birch Society who believed in the Illuminati, and also Garrison anonymous letters. Wilson, in fact, sent some, and so that was kind of the early days of Wilson and Thornley being involved. The early days of the Discordian Society, which was kind of this like a group of artists, free thinkers, pranksters, during that counterculture period who came together. And so anyway, as I started learning the story about Thornley, part of it, after during the Garrison investigation, he denied any knowledge of being part of a conspiracy. But later in the 70s, he started suspecting that he might have been unwittingly sucked into this conspiracy in New Orleans. And the whole episode with being pursued by Garrison and also experimenting with psychedelics, I think, had something to do with it, and starting to kind of buy into some of these conspiracies. Maybe, he started remembering different people he had met in the past, and maybe they were, and he thought they were, had brought him into the conspiracy to use him as an unwitting dupe, much like Oswald. And as time passed, he became more and more paranoid, and ultimately, for a period of time, suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. And so, and even, started to believe he'd been a victim of mind control, that he and Oswald had been part of this Nazi conspiracy. They were kind of like some type of children that were raised to become assassins. All these crazy ideas entered into his head. And so, it was a fascinating story looking into this guy. So I jumped into it, and so, started seeking out people to interview. And one of those was Robert Anton Wilson, who I ended up going out to interview. And let's see, I always kind of forget the date. It was, I know it was before 9/11, so it was either, early, maybe in the spring of 2001, we went out to Santa Cruz, California. I invited Greg along since Wilson had met him before. I thought that might help break the ice a little bit, and interviewed him during that period. And he ended up providing the foreword to that book, which ended up being The Prankster and the Conspiracy. I'm trying to remember the subtitle: Kerry, Thornley, Oswald, and how Thornley inspired the counterculture.
Nice. Okay.
Well, see, I can pick up that thread in another point, but Greg can jump in too if he would like. Well, if he has anything to add.
I have a question for you, Greg. Did he ever find out that you weren't writing for who you said you were when you first talked to him?
I think I told him at one point, and it cracked him up. He thought it was hilarious.
He wouldn't care.
No, he didn't care at all. I think he was like he was kind of happy that I had bluffed my way into some place I wasn't supposed to be. I mean, that's a very Discordian, countercultural, hippie intelligence operative way to do things. So, I used the force and bluffed my way in, and I think I may have earned some like tiny bit of respect from that. And I did notice he wrote a book. It was an encyclopedia of weirdness. What was it called, Adam? Do you remember? It was
Reality is What You Can Get Away With. Is that what you're?
Was it? Because it was basically an encyclopedia of every weird thing that he'd encountered. He was and wanted to let people know about. The Discordianism was in there, and the Flat Earth Society was in there, and the Illuminati was in there, and the Excluded Middle, my magazine, was listed in that. And I hadn't talked to him in like 3 or 4 years at that point. I was like, oh, wow, holy crap, he actually remembered me. And so I think at that point I wrote him, and we exchanged a few letters. And I saw him at book signings and things occasionally. I think there was not even a convention, but just like a one-day event in Los Angeles that was held at the Masonic, like this giant Masonic center in the middle of Los Angeles on Wilshire Boulevard. And so we were like in the inner sanctum of this old Masonic temple, and Wilson was running a role-playing game that he invented. I can't remember the name of it. Do you, Adam? Where people would walk around and they would try and figure out, I guess, who was like controlling it was basically a game to figure out who was, behind the conspiracy to control everything, except it involved people that were playing roles. Like some people would play Men in Black, and some people would play aliens, and some people would play CIA agents, and other people would play, counterculture, wackos or whatever, conspiracy theorists. And you had to play these roles. And I noticed when people were playing it, they started getting paranoid, even though they knew it was a game, which was really funny. But he was at that, and so was Timothy Leary, which was a really weird set of circumstances for me. So I got to sit down and talk to Timothy Leary for like 20 minutes and Wilson at the same time.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing. And then the next time I saw them, when was Adam, do you remember when the DisinfoCon was? Was that 99?
Yeah, around
New York City?
Right. Yeah, I think that's the right time frame.
That was the next time I saw him, I believe. And that was Richard Metzger put that together. Genesis Peorage was there. Wilson. Oh God, I think they had Marilyn Manson on like by satellite or something. God, who else? Kenneth Anger.
I think Ken Thomas was there. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken was there. Because I guess Metzger liked my magazine, he had me speak. So actually, I was on the same speaking bill with Wilson this one time. And so what I did most of the time was sat in the green room and talked to everyone. I think John Vankin was speaking, the guy with the 50 greatest, 70 greatest conspiracies guy. And I just sat in the green room talking to everybody. Everybody I just mentioned, I talked to all those people and had really great conversations with them, and cracked jokes and played tricks on each other. And Wilson was, he was really on. I just remember he was very friendly, very on. And at that point, I think he was in a wheelchair. So when he came out to speak, he was like the headliner. He was the last person to speak. They brought him out in a wheelchair, and he cracked everybody up. There was like 1,000 people there. I think that's the most people I've ever spoken to at once.
Oh.
I don't think he was quite in a wheelchair, but he was using a walker around.
Oh, okay. For some reason,
time.
I just remember him sitting down when he being wheeled out there or something. That's how I remember it. I don't know.
I'd seen the video of his presentation. Some of his, and that one was like he did kind of a stand-up routine, even though he's just sitting down. It was pretty relaxed.
Sit down, stand up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing I did at that conference was I brought a baseball, and I had all the speakers sign it. So I've got a baseball signed by like Robert Anton Wilson's Genesis Peorage and oh God, I can't remember who else was there. Are You Serious? Same guy. What's his name? Ken Hoffman, I think. The magic. I'm sorry. The Mondo 2000 guy.
Yeah. Are You Serious?
So it was just that's the next time I met and talked with Wilson, and then I think the time after that, did we go twice, Adam, or just the one time?
No, just the one time. Okay.
Because I remember being at his place twice for some reason. Maybe I went for another reason. I don't know, or I'm hallucinating it. But the time we went there, it was I never actually got to sit down in his place with him. And when Adam said, "Do you want to go talk to Bob Wilson?" I was like, I dropped everything, and we went over there, and and he interviewed him for a while. we cracked jokes. We talked about stuff. He ordered a pizza. It was just basically a afternoon and evening hanging out with Bob Wilson. And then we heard he was getting worse in health, and he finally passed away. And we went up to Santa Cruz for the memorial, which was pretty incredible. All the different people that were there, and they had hot brownies on the table for everybody. And there was his ashes were in a box with a golden Discordian apple on it, I believe.
Nice.
And this beautiful oak box. And they, at the end of the ceremony, they went out on a boat in the bay in Santa Cruz, and we all sat on the beach and watched. I think his wife dump his ashes in the ocean.
Wow.
Yeah, and then a bunch of speakers came on, different speakers talking about things, and we all got bored and left and went to the Bigfoot Museum.
Yeah, it went on for hours. There was a big crowd there, at least, I don't know, a couple hundred people.
Yeah. Ken was there. There's a picture with Ken, Adam, myself, and Tim Quidlin, the torture king. Yeah.
I forgot about that photo. I don't know if I have that anymore. Yeah,
it's a really fun picture. Yeah, it was a real. And Mike Marinacci was there, I believe, too, the author of Weird California, Mysterious California, and a later co-author of Weird California. But yeah, there's a lot of people that his influence is really deep throughout the counterculture, and especially the post-zine world, the zine world, and the post-zine world, and the cyber world that grew out of all that. Wilson is like the ghost of the machine in that. I mean, his spirit inhabits a lot of the internet right now, and the wackiest corners of it. And I can see his influence and his smirky face and twinkling eyes showing up everywhere in different places, in different guises, and the way people interact with each other, and the way people don't take themselves too seriously, and the two things I learned from Wilson that really stick with me is, one, the winter script,
right, and
two, the vicious agnosticism, like death to all fanatics. That's in the there's a page in the Discordian Bible. There's just a little banner that says death to all fanatics. And I think that his model agnosticism grew out of that. Well, it was from other thinkers too, like Krzyzewski, but model agnosticism is the other thing I got out of his writings, which is don't believe in any belief system, including your own. Don't always question. And yes. I'm almost militant about that. I will not stick with one thing. I try not to anyway. Or I'm always trying to think of what the opposite of that thing is. Like the thing that I really like, what's the opposite of it? Does it piss me off? Does it have merit? Things like that. And that's another thing that sticks with me from Wilson. Oh, and on his birthday once remember the Total Information Awareness Office in the NSA, I think it was?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that, Soraya?
No.
Somebody, and if I get this wrong, Adam, just, say wrong. Somebody I believe in the NSA started this office called Total Information Awareness, which was basically just to, pick up, supposedly, to pick up electronic intelligence from anybody saying anything having to do with kill the president or terrorism or whatever. And nobody knows if it ever actually existed as a real thing, but the government announced it.
It did.
It did? Okay. Mm-hmm. But the thing was, the thing that was the total weird joke was the logo they put out. It was like an eye on top of a pyramid with a beam coming out of it, like the all-seeing eye. It's like, if you want to scare every single... it was like Wilson made it up. If you want to scare every single conspiracy theorist in the world, that was a perfect way to do it. And they had this...
Ever Illuminatus.
Exactly, yeah. And I remember one year, 2 or 3 years before he died, maybe longer than that, for his birthday, I sent him the T-shirt. He sent me a picture of him wearing it.
Well, I have a story about that. the Office of Information Awareness conversation I had with Wilson. And you've probably read it before, but basically, I don't know if you were on his email list, Greg, but
off and on, seemingly.
Yeah, so this Office of Information Awareness was started after 9/11, and
right.
I don't know if it was like a separate agency to itself, and it was run by John Poindexter. Remember that dude? He was
yeah.
And so Poindexter had a email address with this Office of Information Awareness. And there was a period there where Wilson started CCing John Poindexter with all the emails he sent out to the group, because I asked him, why are you doing this, Bob? And freaked out a few people, and he said, well, I'm just trying to save some taxpayers' money. I figure they need less agents to snoop on me if I just send my emails directly to John Poindexter and see what I'm doing. And we were talking about that. Yeah, and I brought up that the image of the Office of Information Awareness, and you can still find it, do a search on the internet. It's kind of another thing. It was the Information Awareness Office, too, I think was the title, and a lot of people pointed to, well, that was a phrase that Crowley used in his magical rituals. And anyway, I asked him, I should pull up the article I wrote to remember exactly what he said, but I asked him, what do you think of that image? And he said, I don't know what the hell to think. It's like the surrealists have taken over the conspiracy or something like that,
Yeah, you couldn't have had a more perfect way to set paranoids off, spinning into total information paranoia, except with that image. I mean, if you look up Total Information Awareness Office, it'll come up right away, and you'll just go, "Are you kidding?" When you see it.
It's like some of the imagery you see now, occasionally you'll see this stuff, like some of the stuff the Army is doing with some of their commercials and UFOs and things. Like, wow, they trying to reach a weirdo audience? Probably. I wanted to pick up on the thread because I was talking about Illuminatus and this Operation Mind. I won't say the whole word.
Mindf?
Yeah, Mindf. Everybody should know what that is. And so I talked before about how they were sending out these prank letters. Kind of the idea was to reframe the Illuminati as a good thing and take it away from like the John Birch Society and fringe Christians who were trying to frame it as this, whatever they were trying to frame it as. And so they started
Christian.
Yeah, so they started Operation Mindf, and part of it was pranking Garrison, fringe Christians, and whatnot, and so part of this plot was to plant this letter in Playboy magazine, because Wilson was an editor there. He edited the Playboy forum, where there was a couple forums at Playboy during that period. One was the questions about sex and whatnot, and then
the advisor. And
I forget, one was the advisor, one was the forum, but Wilson ran the one that dealt with politics, civil liberties, these type of stuff. And he and Thornley planted this letter. There would be a letter sent in, and Wilson would answer it, but they made up both the letter that was sent in and then Wilson answered it. It brought up this whole Illuminati conspiracy. The writer was asking if the Illuminati was behind all the major assassinations and all this type of stuff. And so they kind of planted that seed in there as part of Operation Mindf. And it did, in fact, kind of plant a seed in the counterculture that grew over time, and they were also planning, like, for instance, they put out a fake Illuminati chart, and they all these guys wrote for the different underground magazines during that period, and they came up with this fake Illuminati chart that included, Richard Nixon and Richard Daley and people like this, but they also included themselves using their Discordian names. I remember Wilson's Discordian name was Mordecai the Foul.
That's it.
And so they were planning all this stuff, and throughout the counterculture, nobody knew exactly what what was going on. And at the same time, Wilson started getting all these letters about different conspiracies and stuff. It kind of lit a fuse. So some actual letters came into him about all these crazy conspiracies he started looking into, and he decided with all this material. And so also at Playboy was Bob Shea, who was a friend of his, a fellow writer, and they decided to take all this material and write the Illuminatus. And the original plan was like one big book that would be like 900, 1,000 pages. That was their mad scheme. Eventually it got broken up and some chapters removed. But anyway, they started inserting all these crazy conspiracies in there, and also information about the Discordian Society, and as well as talking about the Principia Discordia, which was the Bible of Discordianism. And at this time, the Discordians were starting different cabals too. One was the John Dillinger Died for Your Sins cabal society, and all this stuff got woven into the Illuminatus trilogy, that John Dillinger was actually a good guy and he hadn't actually been killed, and he was working with the Discordians against the Illuminati. And like I said, there's references to Principia Discordia and Malaclips the Younger, who was an actual person, Greg Hill, and Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst is mentioned in the Illuminatus trilogy. And nobody knew who these people were. This was just a handful of freaks and friends, that were the Discordian Society. But he incorporated all this stuff into the Illuminatus trilogy. And so they were, they were writing that in 1969. It took many, many years for it to get published, finally in 1975. But, over time it became quite an influence, just re-injecting the Illuminati into popular culture and all these other crazy conspiracies. And in many cases it was satire or poking fun at extreme theories, but all of this meshed together, started, taking its place in popular culture. And, one of those things was the mention of the Principia Discordia in the Illuminatus trilogy, which most people thought, well, that's just a made-up thing. But then other people started learning that the Principia Discordia was actually a real book, that was collaborated on with these other guys, Wilson and Thornley and Bob Shea, published under Greg Hill's pseudonym of Malaclips the Younger.
Right,
the first editions were like, a few hundred copies to go out to friends. Then finally, with people, after Illuminatus was published, people started learning, well, this is actually a real book. And the publisher of Lumponics during that period, Michael Hoy, reached out to Greg Hill and eventually did a real publication of the Principia Discordia in around, it was like 1977, 1978. And so once again, it wasn't a huge publication, but this time it was, a few thousand, maybe 10,000 copies or whatever. So this in joke between, Kerry Thornley, Craig Hill, and later Robert Anton Wilson and others. All of a sudden now it became something that was in the counterculture now that became another influence, and people started wondering what Discordianism was, and they soon understood it was just a joke that anybody could be a Discordian pope and start their own Discordian cabal. And now, what is this, 50, 60 years later, if you go on the internet, you'll find tens of thousands of people who are Discordian popes out there creating their own versions of Discordianism.
I have a VHS tape somewhere of one of their like, I can't even remember what it was. Like sort of this is why you should be a Discordian, like type of a thing that they put out, that someone sent me a copy of at one point.
Mm-hmm. The mantra or the axiom of Discordianism is, we Discordians must stick apart, which means basically Discordianism can be whatever you really want it to be, and you don't have to agree with any other Discordian on their version of Discordianism, which was the type of model agnosticism that Robert Anton Wilson loved.
And that's also where the concept of slack came from, right?
Well, now, slack came from the Church of Subgenius, which is an outgrowth of Discordianism in a sense. But then Subgenius, they'll argue about that too. That no, but there was definitely some influence of Discordianism into the Subgenius movement.
Are we talking about Subgenius now?
Maybe the VHS tape I have was Subgenius. That
Probably,
what it was. Yeah.
You hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When he was talking about Subgenius, about this Discordianism, it's like, well, that's directly led into Subgenius religion.
Well, it amuses me that you have the messenger program called Slack, which it didn't dawn on me right away, but that's where they got the name from, because it's supposed to make things more convenient, so you have more slack.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's brilliant.
Yeah, of course. When the Subgenius thing started, I joined in wholeheartedly because it was a group for people who didn't like joining in, which is perfect. Everything was... it was like Discordianism taken up a generation and made even more insane, and with a sense of like if Discordianism was an advertising firm, that would be a Subgenius Foundation.
And when you talk about him being an agnostic too, I mean, realistically, he's a real skeptic, because that's the whole thing behind real skepticism, is to continually ask questions and not settle on any answers.
Yeah, to reserve judgment. In fact, reserve judgment as long as absolutely humanly possible, until just a concatenation of evidence just forces you to make a conclusion, not to make a conclusion first and then just go and find all the evidence that has to do with that conclusion or whatever your belief is or whatever, which I see that all the time. I mean, the excluded middle came straight out of Wilson making that delineation between believers and anti-believers, and the book, The New Inquisition, which was the first book I read by him, which was called Irrational Rationalism and the Citadel of Science was the subtitle. And the book dealt with people like the Psychop and James Randi and stuff like that, and how they weren't believers. I mean, they weren't skeptics. They were anti-believers. They believed in anti-belief, not in skepticism. Skepticism, pure skepticism, is like you said, Soraya. It's reserve judgment. You reserve judgment for as long as possible, and to be okay with reserving judgments. Like, well, no decision has been made yet. Well, no, we don't have enough information yet. People are so beaten into us that you have to have an opinion on something.
Yes.
Or you have to be on the side of something. And I absolutely reject that with every piece of brain matter that I have. I do not like falling into a category. And it's part of the reason, and I think you too, that I've never joined up with any group. I've never joined for my show. I've never aligned with anybody. I don't have advertising. I don't want to have any influence of anything except, my friends and my insanity.
I was just going to say something and I lost it. The whole BS thing too, the don't believe your own BS, which kind of doubles with the bull poop and belief system at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Wilson always also encouraged people to explore reality tunnels, to kind of set aside certain beliefs, but then jump into something like, this is back in the days when people were, looking at different conspiracy theories and stuff. For instance, the Kennedy assassination. Let's jump down that rabbit hole and kind of take on these different theories and, entertain them. Maybe put your mind in the head where, I'll kind of believe this for a period of time. Whatever it might be, conspiracy theories or different, belief in psychic phenomena, just to basically open your mind to different ideas and different experiences. But, when you get to a certain point, Wilson always emphasized to be able to step back out, have some perspective and step back out of that reality tunnel and, then look at things a different way. One of the things he got into was ritual magic, exploring that. And once again, to be successful at different forms of ritual magic, at some point in the experiment, you need to believe or pretend to believe that you're going to get a certain, result from something. So those are kind of the type of head games that he was willing to, to play with himself and encourage others to kind of have that playful nature. And along the way, in I think this was July of 1973, he was coming off an acid trip while he was also conducting a Crowleyan ritual called the Invocation of the Guardian Angel or something like that. And during the course of that, he believed for, a period of time that he came in contact with entities from the Sirius star system.
That's interesting.
Yeah, him and Larry were all actually both involved in that.
Well, yes and no.
No? Okay, then I have it wrong.
No,
it's sort of wrong.
It's yes. They both were exploring communication with alien entities or extraterrestrial powers or some.
And Geller, too, actually.
But when both of their experiences were going on, they didn't know that was happening. They only found out about it a little bit later. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, I've written about this before, and so have a lot of people. This somehow Sirius became a thing with a few people at the same time. All of a sudden, we have these experiences where they believed they were in contact with entities from Sirius. One was Philip K. Dick. Another was a writer by the name of Doris Lessing. And I'm forgetting a few people too, but this all kind of happened.
Geller too, I think.
Well, not particularly.
No, I guess his were from Spectra or something like that. That was the name of the group. Yeah, they weren't from Sirius, though. You're right.
And so something had been tapped into that all of a sudden these different people were having contact with Sirius, but none of them knew it at the time. They only found out a short time later that they were all having these serious type experiments or experiences. Later on, Wilson, once again, we're talking about jumping in and out of reality tunnels. He wasn't sure what had actually happened, if he'd been, contacted by entities from Sirius, if it was his left brain talking to his right brain, if it was effective coming off an acid trip. But, that was an important part of the Robert Anton Wilson experience he writes about in his book Cosmic Trigger, if you want to find out more about that period. But so he had an interest in UFOs for sure, but being Wilson, his perspective was kind of like unlike anybody else exactly, and he was interacting with Jacques Vallée. He talks about that in Cosmic Trigger Run.
Really?
Pretty interesting contacts, and he stayed kind of engaged in UFOs over the years. He didn't speak at conferences per se, but recently I was reminded my zine collection I finally got together and sent off to Miles Lewis for the Anomaly Archives. So there was like 3 boxes of stuff there, and some of the material was copies of Saucer Smear from the 1980s. Jim Mosley's zine magazine, newsletter, I guess is the proper term of what it was. And I was surprised to find that Robert Anton Wilson, during the mid-90s, like every issue of Saucer Smear, he was writing in, commenting on the saucer scene during that period. And like Greg said, he was critical of Scott and Randy and what's his name, Phil Klass, but also he came from the perspective of understanding that our human perceptions weighed heavily into the UFO experience. So he had a unique take on it, and also that it might be related to some type of psychic phenomena.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't put up those walls so that he's able to see these connections. And in fact, the first time I heard about David Huggins, the artist that does the pictures of himself having sex with like big-headed, alien-faced,
is that
Playboy bunny looking women?
Is that the Love and Saucers documentary on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that guy. Great documentary. My friend Ferry Ordozu wrote a book about David Huggins too, which is really good. But the first time I heard about Huggins was, I believe Wilson was talking about him, and also he may have told Mosley, because the Huggins paintings started showing up in Saucer Smear on a regular basis in the 90s. Because, Mosley just couldn't believe, he was blown away that somebody was doing these kind of paintings. I mean, it was right up his alley as a observer of the weird part of UFOs study and the community and all the myriad weirdness, weird forms that it took. And Jim tried to be on top of that. My friend Susan St. Clair, at one time she was on my show, and I said, "Who are your favorite ufologists?" And she said her favorite was Jim Mosley, which really surprised me. And then I thought, well, of course it is, because he never took it. He took it totally seriously and not seriously at all at the same time. I mean, it's no wonder him and Wilson kind of clicked. Mm-hmm. They basically were from the same generation and from the same kind of skewed viewpoint that was the best part of that generation, like the psychotic part of the Great Generation that we don't hear about except as beatniks or various artists or whatever. But there were other people like Mosley and Wilson and various musicians, etc., that came out of that world too. And they weren't necessarily left or right or anything like that politically. They soaked up all of it. And Wilson was a very big proponent, as Adam said, of experiencing different, what he called reality tunnels. And I took that quite seriously.
Yeah.
I would inhabit a belief system for weeks or months at a time, and people would think I was going nuts, or they'd get mad at me or whatever. And I was like, okay, so I'll switch that one off. Or if I started feeling paranoid, I would switch out of that reality tunnel because I did not like feeling paranoid. It just didn't. It's not a good way to live.
No.
So anyway, but I credit Wilson with being able to make my configure my mind so that I could change the channel almost at will on a belief system, and that way, when somebody's telling me their crazy story, I totally believe them at the time, and that way I don't miss anything because I'm not sitting going, oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because then I've already missed what they're trying to tell me, and there's gold, even if it's just funny gold and fool's gold, but there's gold in almost everything that somebody says, even the most crazy, whacked out person you ever met. There's pieces of wisdom there sometimes. That has really stuck with me. When I went to Mexico last year, a friend of mine asked me to go to the Virgin of Guadalupe Chapel in Mexico City. I mean, it is, the Virgin of Guadalupe is probably one of the most powerful goddess figures in the world. And she's also the patron saint of Mexico. So there's this huge complex, and all there's 5 or 6 different cathedrals there, built in different periods of time. And a Catholic friend of mine asked me to go and pray for someone in the family, but because there were health problems, and she asked me, it's like, could you pray for this relative of mine because he's having problems? And she said, yeah, you should add some stuff in for you too. And I was like, what? She said, she's a goddess, she can handle it. So what I did is I went there with Miguel, and I went into the chapel, and I looked at the original image on the piece of cloth that supposedly was put there miraculously. It is the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe. It looks like a painting on cloth. That was supposedly, appeared miraculously on this Aztec Indian's tunic. So it's in the church there, like it's the center of every image you see of the Virgin of Guadalupe is based on that image, obviously. Anyway, so I looked at it for a while, stared at it, went, concentrated on it. And then I walked about halfway back in the church where there was nobody. I mean, it's like, it seats like 5,000 people. It's massive. And thinking of Wilson at the time, I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to completely inhabit a reality tunnel for these 20, 30 minutes that I'm in here. And I downloaded a message, like a prayer to the Virgin of Guadalupe. I had no idea what I was supposed to say. So I just downloaded it and put it on my phone. and I just inserted the names in of, my friend and her relative and my parents. And I sat there in the church, and I sat there staring at that image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, probably 100 feet away from me. And it took me 10 minutes to get myself into a mindset where I absolutely 100% believed that if I appealed to the Virgin of Guadalupe and I asked her for these things, that she would intercede on my behalf, or at least my friend's behalf and mine, or whatever.
Right.
And it took me about 10 minutes to get myself worked into this. And when I felt like I completely believed and I had no other thoughts in my mind except that this is going to work, I took out my phone and I read the prayer. And then it said, say 5 Hail Marys. Like, I've never said a Hail Mary in my life. So I downloaded that too. So I can, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, whatever it is. And, say 5 Hail Marys. And then I finished. And then I sat there. And it took me about 10 or 15 minutes to come out of that mindset. I felt like I was in a trance.
You were.
Yeah.
I was totally in a trance. I completely dropped any doubt I had about anything. I just said, okay, I'm a devotee of Virgin Guadalupe for these 20 or 30 minutes. And when I got back, I asked, and she said, yeah, he got better. I don't know if it worked, but might as well have worked. And all the stuff I asked for, things seemed to go better. So I have no idea. I'm not going to convert to Catholicism or anything like that. Go ahead. But the fact that Wilson had kind of primed me, it's like, inhabit some other reality tunnel for a while. and his readings of Crowley and in Western occultism and in psychology and depth psychology and things like that. The idea that you can change your reality by thinking about it in a certain way, that's a very old idea. It's a magical idea. It's an idea from quantum physics. It's an idea in information theory. That fascinates me. And so, if it wasn't for Wilson, I wouldn't have been sitting there in that church doing that thing, because I would have just thought, oh, it's stupid.
Right.
Catholics molest boys. I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's like, you know what? Let me just inhabit the belief system for a while as an acolyte and see what happens. And it was what tourist does that? So it was a very educational, almost, it was a very positive experience. I really liked it. But the fact that I have this model agnosticism, when I was done with it, I said, that's interesting. Okay, I'll move on and try something else, now.
Well, I think reality does really depend on our beliefs. Like, I think you put yourself in a mindset where you truly believed it, and that's why it seemed to actually have an effect. Whereas if you were just pretending, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, and you think it might be a filtering thing. It's like, well, I'm just filtering out the stuff that doesn't, accord with the belief system. But I was giving a talk to these college students. I do it every semester at UC Irvine. A friend of mine teaches a course called UFOs and Culture. So he shows Mirage Men. Nice. Anyway, and then he has me come in and talk. And one of the sessions, I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. And one of the sessions about a year ago, one of the kids said, have you ever felt paranoid? It's like, oh, well, hell yeah. I had a totally paranoid period. I thought people were opening my mail, which they were, because you're not going to imagine somebody has opened your mail.
Right. Right.
I got weird phone calls all the time, had funny noises at the end of the line.
I've been there too, my friend.
Yeah. I had noises coming out of my kachina, area where my kachinas were. Anyway, I went through this whole paranoid period, and the person asked, well, why aren't you paranoid now? I said, well, I got tired of it. And I said, I don't want to feel like this anymore, which I credit to Wilson. But the weird thing was, when I made the decision, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, when I made the decision to not be paranoid, the stuff that everybody else would notice, like the open mail and the phone calls, they stopped.
Yeah.
So either my belief in them and my paranoia was fueling them, or coincidentally they stopped when I didn't want to feel scared anymore. I don't know which it is, but it was a very strange coincidence.
I think we manipulate far more of reality than we realize, and we have no control over it. So that's part of the reason we don't realize it. And
well, that's part of what some esoteric practices are involved in. It's just causing reality to conform to will,
Right. Well, yeah, that's what magic is all about.
In some cases, noticing it, though, you put yourself in a space where you see more things you might not have been aware of if you hadn't.
Right, you're not filtering.
Up to that. Yeah.
And I would have put that down to that, except for that, a phone call going over, calling me over and over again and letting the phone ring many times over week-long periods, and having my mail tampered with from just 2 people, nobody else. And, I'd come home and I'd show my wife, girlfriend, my wife at the time. It's like, look, here's another letter. It was Carla Turner was one of them. Every letter from Carla Turner was either ripped open, obviously opened, destroyed, whatever.
Wow. Yeah, I remember you write about that in It Defies Language.
Yeah, and in the interview that I printed with her posthumously, because I think by the time the book came out, she had died of cancer. But in Wake Up Down There, the collection in the magazine, I actually reproduced an image of one of her envelopes where she wrote "sealed by sender" over a piece of tape and put it over the seal. When she started doing that, it stopped.
Huh.
Now, when Greg and I interviewed Wilson, Greg recorded it, put it on a tape, and then he was going to get it to me. And it didn't come for, it'd been a few weeks, month. I said, Greg, where's the tape? I'll get it to you. And then he sent it. And a month or two passed. And Greg, when are you going to send that tape? And he said he sent it. And I don't remember the timeline exactly, but it seemed like it was another 4 or 5 months. I finally received it in the mail.
Huh.
And it appeared, it was messed up. It looked like somebody opened up and resealed it.
Yeah, and we both live in California. It should have gotten there in a day or two.
Yeah.
With some of the people I talked to, these Discordians, Wilson, and there was a few, Louise Lacey, and
Newport,
and another guy, Simcoe. I heard, I didn't really. I wasn't imagining this stuff. There was a telltale click with some of these guys. I heard it with Wilson a few times. It's like it sounded like somebody was tapping the phone or making us think that, or I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like part of it, I think, might have actually been a real thing happening, because all of these folks were involved in activism in the 1960s. And so that, that might, it's hard to imagine 20, 30 years later, you still got people listening into your conversations, but I definitely noticed that going on, how do you prove something like that? You can't. Was it my imagination? I don't think so, but who knows?
Yeah, it just sits in that area that the paranormal and UFOs and things like that sit in. You aren't quite sure, because it's so not normal that you don't know what to think of it, and you don't know if it's actually happened in a lot of cases and for a lot of people, because it's just so outside the norm.
But it doesn't happen when I talk to my grandma or somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, it seems like fields of weirdness draw weirdness towards them or have them around them or whatever. And if you try to control it or try to capture it or whatever, it just doesn't work. It slips away and goes away. The minute you stop paying attention to it, it comes back, it seems. And you notice that with just being involved in the weirdness. I mean, just now Adam said, oh yeah, I know that stuff happened, because I had a field of strangeness and paranoia around me, so it drew in strangeness and paranoia.
Yeah.
I had a glass break in my hand once. I was holding it and it exploded in my hand. I heard a pop, and it could have been because it was tempered glass and it was under tension or something. But I've never had something like that happen before or since. And it was right when I was about to get divorced. And I was really, really upset. And the next day I went to interview Dean Radin. I told him about it, and he goes, "Well, don't you see that's exactly what should happen in that situation? All that tension is there, and it just manifested itself physically as an exploding glass."
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the glass was tempered and it just happened to explode in my hand. Whatever. Right. But there's always that question there. But
I mean,
the fact that I was
presenting that in a court of law, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not real evidence.
Yeah, exactly. No paranormal stuff is real evidence. After lab ESP, a lot of it is pretty good evidence that something's going on, but you can't really control it. That's just the way it always has been. But it's there. I mean,
definitely.
But it's just not something that you can harness. I think that's part of what's been going on the last 10, 20 years here, is with all the people interested in people like Chris Bledsoe or whatever, is that they're trying to figure out how this junk works. Because if you can control it, you really don't. It's funny, we were joking about Lou Elizondo earlier. I talked to him once, and he said if this technology, or you could do these things on demand, psychic things, UFO things, the physics that UFOs represent, you would not have to answer to anyone. And the fact that nobody has done that yet would indicate fairly strongly that nobody's been able to duplicate, anything that we know as paranormal or psychic or UFO yet. Or because if they could do it on demand, they could you could bamboozle everybody. You could be completely impervious to any kind of harm. It would be basically either a country or at least a Bond evil villain or something.
Oh, God.
But
you'd be a god, yeah.
You do have monks that seem to, like Tibetan monks and stuff that seem to be able to manifest this stuff at will. They just have no desire to exploit it.
Exactly, and that might be part of it. That's another thing. When I first interviewed Radin, and by extension, I think Lynn Buchanan told me this, the remote viewer, that people in the beginning of the remote viewing program were trying to do things like silver futures or whatever, and they'd like hit it big once or twice, and then it wouldn't work anymore. Because one, they were trying to control it, and two, egos got involved. And he said when egos get involved and greed gets involved and all that, it tends to make it go away. Even Criswell said this. I mean, he said it as a joke. You could see it in the movie, the movie with Johnny Depp, the Ed Wood movie. He said, I used to be able to do it, but then when I started trying to make money at it, the gift went away.
Yeah.
And he actually said that. Criswell actually said that. Whatever you believe about Criswell. But, a lot of people have said that. He's, they're, as long as people remain fairly anonymous and not greedy about their powers, they seem to work a little bit better. Or you become, if you're good at it, you become the kind of businessman that seems to know when things are going to hit and invest at just the right time and all that. But that people just put that down to good intuition or whatever. But
I think there's a disconnect
kind of stuff
you
exists.
need.
Yeah, exactly. You can't. I think the minute they say I'm psychic and I know all this stuff, it's like that it probably won't work anymore. If they just kind of think, this might be a good investment. You know, and they just believe that they have a good intuition for it, and that's probably all it is. Or, they're seeing into their own future or whatever. Who knows?
I just had a Robert Anton Wilson synchronicity here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Via Twitter. Somebody, I'm not sure if this is who this guy is. Robert Evans is his name, but he posted something about from a news source that says companies are getting rid of drug tests because they can't find enough workers. And he posted, "Rest in peace to Robert Anton Wilson, who would have loved to see this moment."
Yeah, I saw that. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, what the hell are they going to test for anymore? I guess cocaine. You got pot in your system. Like, so?
Yeah.
It's legal. You're not going to have anybody, applying. The other thing is, I always thought it was a joke. I worked in the entertainment industry in post-production for years. They drug test people. It's like, are you kidding me? It's the entertainment industry. Are you? Yeah.
So
I guess they, had contracts with Disney and all that, and they're worried about people having piracy or whatever. Maybe
they're testing all the grunts that are doing work, but
yeah, the writers at David Letterman, they're probably encouraging them.
Exactly.
I find that today's world is probably the exact opposite of what Robert Anton Wilson is doing, because you have so many people who are so set on thinking they know all the answers. Like it's become a world of like probably 75% of people out there are absolutely positive they're right about everything. And they live in these echo chambers that just kind of enforce that. And even with this stuff, occasionally, like someone just left a comment recently on the show I did with Miguel and Joshua going on about how we don't believe in the physical aspect of UFOs, that we just can't acknowledge there's anything physical to them. And I'm like, we've never said that. I'm pretty sure we've repeatedly said we don't know what this stuff is. I mean, there's obviously a physical component, but it doesn't mean it's a purely physical thing, nor that every UFO encounter is physical. And I don't think people know how to do that.
No, that's the model agnosticism thing. It's like, why do you have to believe one or the other? I asked Dave, this was like such a cool thing. I interviewed David Weatherly, the Bigfoot researcher.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, we were just sitting there in a hotel room with a recorder. I said, quick, David, Bigfoot, paranormal or physical creature? And he said, why not both?
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, why not a creature that can, walk through a dimension or disappear just the way we walk through a door because they feel like going there.
Yeah.
He says, there's that possibility. But see, to me, that was just a wonderful way to say, look, it can be both. Where, and then you'll have people like, Jeff Meldrum and maybe Coleman and people like that saying it's a flesh and blood biological creature, and eventually we're gonna get a body or whatever. I've almost 100% certain we will never find a dead Bigfoot body.
Right.
Otherwise, we would have found one by now.
Yes. I remember years ago. I mean, Lyle Blackburn has kind of started to move away from the flesh and blood thing a little bit. But a few years ago, I got talked to him in person, interviewed him in person, and when I got to that, I said, "So why haven't we found a body?" And he just kind of got really quiet for a minute. He goes, "I don't know."
It's just like the UFO thing. As soon as you come up with a theory that you think covers all the bases, there are vast areas of bases that it does not cover, and you must actively deny those things to make your theory work. And this is the problem with a lot of like fundamentalist skeptics. Is like you're ignoring vast swaths of information here to make your story work. Go ahead.
Well, there's a circuit too, of Bigfoot conferences and UFO conferences. So
yeah,
to get invited back, like a lot of things, or to be part of the clique, you need, it's like you got to draw between the color between the lines.
Yeah, just like the skeptics or the skeptical, community does. It's the same thing. It's herd mentality, and what did Leary and Wilson call it? Mammalian politics or something like that.
I mean, to me, I think that this stuff you're never going to find a single solution to any of it because it behaves kind of like a web. There anywhere you poke on the web is going to connect to other things, but it's not necessarily going to be obvious why or how those things connect.
Yeah, I mean, you keep pulling on one thing and you see the result somewhere else, but there's not a direct connection to that you could trace logically.
Right. And it's like, some of it's caused by this and some of it's caused by this, but it may look similar even if it has two different causes.
Yeah. And if you try to find out what that cause is, you'll be lost. It doesn't work. That's where I guess belief comes in. You must believe that it works and then just leave it alone if it works. Don't try to figure out how it works, just that it works. That's that may be something that should be part of the UFO. Oh, I know what I wanted to say about Wilson and the UFO thing, where you said we were talking about model agnosticism and being in a reality tunnel for a while and dropping it. That was the basis of my idea. That came directly from Wilson too, where I said UFO organizations should consist of 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people.
Yeah.
They should do one project, and when they're done, stop, break up, and go do something else.
Yeah.
And that came directly from the model agnosticism. And the other thing is, if you get in a group and you start having groupthink and all that, that's exactly the opposite of what UFOs and paranormal things are, especially especially ghosts and cryptids and that, but especially UFOs.
Yeah.
Once you codify something, you've killed the inquiry, you've killed any kind of answer you might get out of it is gone now because you've locked yourself in, and your ego and your group and everybody wearing hats and all that has been locked into this one idea about it. And that's where you will stay, and you will get into your corner and you will defend that corner. And everybody outside that corner will be going, "Are you guys nuts?" So, because that's all you'll see. I mean, that's the Rorschach blot is going to it'll be your Rorschach blot forever. And then it just becomes you, and it becomes your group. It doesn't become the phenomenon anymore. It becomes your idea about what the phenomenon is.
Yes. Yeah. We're just about out of time. Are you two willing to keep going a little bit for a Patreon segment?
Yeah, sure. Nobody's yelling at me, and my parents seem to be okay right now. So
all right. Okay.
We must be blessed. I would love to do it.
All right. So tell people where they can find each of you. Greg first.
When I start doing shows again, and Adam's going to yell at me because I still have a show that I did with him and David Perkins at Radio Misterioso, RADIO, spelled like in Spanish.com, or on Amazon, just stick my name in there and type in UFO, and everything I've written, whatever 5 or 6 books I was involved in or written, will come up.
Okay. And Adam?
Since this show is about Wilson Discordianism, I'll direct them to historiadiscordia.com.
Okay.
And also plug in, if you're interested in the books, plug my name into Amazon or just do a Google search. You'll come up with a lot of stuff.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Plus, we have written a book together, too. We wrote,
which I've never had you on for. Yeah,
let's
we should
plug that. A is for Adamski, The Golden Age of the UFO Contactees by Adam Gorightly and Greg Bishop. You can find that on Amazon.
And I need to have you back on to talk about that because we've never done that. So we'll do that soon, too.
Contactees are fab, yep. I went to that, Paul, recently I was hip to, Adam hit me to this, to the, an exhibit by one of the people we wrote about in the book, Paulina Peavy, who I'm fascinated by, and some art historian person picked up on her work and her paintings, and I got to see all of these paintings inspired by what she said was a UFO entity that channeled all this work through her, or a lot of it.
Oh wow,
and that was fascinating. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit. There's a biography of her coming out.
Yeah, I think Soraya would like the Paulina Peavy angle.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
and her artwork, which is amazing.
Well,
I started crying at the exhibit. I mean, it was just so like, God, this stuff is amazing. So,
well, thank you both for this part, and we'll continue this in a Patreon.
Okay.
Yep.
In 2019, the first Strange Realities Conference took place in Nashville, Tennessee. The pandemic and turmoil the following year could not stop 2020's conference from thriving in cyberspace as a live streaming event. Now, for 2021, the third annual Strange Realities Conference will combine these worlds into a paranormal hybrid event, live in person in Nashville and streaming online. Join us in exploring just how truly strange our reality can be with an interdimensional lineup of speakers presenting unique and intellectual perspectives on magic, mysteries, and the paranormal.
Featuring Alan Greenfield, Dr. J. Michael Bennett, a.k.a. Dr. Future, Tim Bernal, Soraya Ascaf, Dr. Stephen Finley, Aaron Gulius, Amy Pachula, Brent Rains, Chris Ernst, Heather Mosier, Michael Hughes, Jose Herrera, Joshua Cutchin, Kiki Dombrowski, Nathan Isaac, P.D. Newman, Steven Snyder, a.k.a. Recluse, David Metcalf, Timothy Renner, Steve Stockton, and Bren Collier. Tickets available at strangerealities.conference.com.
It's going to be amazing.
I want to take a moment here to give a shout out to all of my Patreons, especially those pledging $10 or more every month. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Eric Hervin, Tim, Andrew Nichols, 100th Monkey Project, A.E. Gaia Quinta, Alex Whitcomb, Alfred Tuttle, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy Incommunicable, Chris Ernst, Craig Cisternos, Craig Parmenter, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Diane B., Dominic O'Malley, Duffy Dowder, Edu Camahort, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Johanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kevin L., Layla Malden, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Sedgter, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, 36 Dingo, Tyler Glimstead, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, William Lovelace, Rand Collier, Stephen D., and Vincent Treewell. And an extra special thanks to Vincent for writing up recaps of every week's show. Thank you all so very much. You really do make this show possible. All right, if you liked that conversation, you're going to love the Patreon segment. We go all over the place with that. We talk more about Robert Anton Wilson, Discordianism, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's a very long segment, so Patreons, we'll get that later in the week. If you want to become a patron, $3 is all it is a month, and you get extra content all month long. All right, I will see you all next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.